Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you to this Asia-Pacific regional commemoration of International Women's Day 2022, Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. We are very honored to have with us today representatives from ESCAP member states, as well as other governments in the region, and other distinguished participants, including our youth who have been participating in the Ambassador for a Day competition. Welcome. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, women and girls are among the most affected by climate change, especially within Asia and the Pacific, which has been labeled the most disaster-prone region in the world. Advancing gender equality within this context, therefore, is one of the imperatives of the 21st century and for the region. And whilst the Beijing Declaration for Action, the Beijing Platform for Action identified women and the environment as one of the critical pillars already back in 1995, the intersection of these two topics is oftentimes overlooked within the region. This year, therefore, as we fast approach the end date of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we would like to take this International Women's Day as the opportunity to examine the intersectionality of Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality and Sustainable Development Goal 13 on climate action, as well as their interlinkages with all the other Sustainable Development Goals. If we are to fulfill our promise to leave no one behind, we must ensure that those impacted by climate change, including women, are put at the center of our policies and programs. We have gathered today to listen to the wisdom of our distinguished excellencies and to hear how youth are using innovative means to amplify their voices and calls for a more sustainable future, and to learn from and discuss with experts from diverse fields with a very distinguished moderator. Together, we can accelerate progress towards incorporating a gender lens in climate action through exchanging knowledge, good practices, and lessons learned in this respect. Let us commence today's commemoration with a message from United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, on the occasion of International Women's Day 2022. Welcome.
On International Women's Day, we celebrate women and girls everywhere. We celebrate their contributions to ending the COVID-19 pandemic. Their ideas, innovations, and activism that are changing our world for the better, and their leadership across all walks of life. But we also recognize that in too many areas, the clock on women's rights is moving backwards. The pandemic has kept girls and women out of schools and workplaces. They face rising poverty and rising violence. They do the vast majority of the world's unpaid but essential care work. They are targets of violence and abuse just because of their gender. In all countries, women are scandalously underrepresented in the halls of power and the boardrooms of business. And as this year theme reminds us, they bear the brunt of climate change and environmental degradation. Starting now on International Women's Day, it's time to turn the clock forward for every woman and girl. Through guaranteeing quality education for every girl, so they can build the lives they want and help make the world a better place for us all. Through massive investments in women's training and decent work. Through effective action to end gender-based violence. Through bold action to protect our planet. Through universal care that is fully integrated into social protection systems. And through targeted measures like gender quotas so we can all benefit from women's ideas, experience, and leadership everywhere decisions are made. Gender inequality is essentially a question of power in a male-dominated world and a male-dominated culture, and power relations must be reversed. So, at United Nations, we have achieved gender parity in senior management at headquarters and around the world, improving our work and better representing the communities we serve. We need more women, environment ministers, business leaders, and presidents and prime ministers. They can push countries to address the climate crisis, develop green jobs, and build a more just and sustainable world. We cannot emerge from the pandemic with the clock spinning backwards on gender equality. We need to turn the clock forward on women's rights. The time is now.
We thank our United Nations Secretary General for his commitment to gender equality within the United Nations and globally. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Amida Alicia Bana, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, to deliver her opening remarks. Ibu Amida, please, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the commemoration of International Women's Day. It is my distinct pleasure to join you today to discuss the theme for this year, which is Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. While women and girls are making remarkable contribution towards building a more sustainable future, numerous barriers remain toward achieving equality. The COVID-19 pandemic has drawn attention to some of these barriers. Within Asia and the Pacific, COVID-19 has increased women's vulnerability to economic shocks, amplifying the livelihoods crisis and pushing more women into informal and underpaid work. Furthermore, COVID-19 has left millions of children and care-dependent adults without the support they need, putting an enormous strain on women and girls and exacerbating the care crisis. There are parallels between the aggravating impact of the pandemic on existing inequalities and the effects of the imminent environmental and climate crisis. Climate change has also erased many hard-fought gains made toward gender equality. These interlinking crises have to be tackled through coordinated efforts to enhance gender justice and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Excellencies, the Asia-Pacific region's response to climate change has significant implications globally and locally. The region is responsible for over 50% of global greenhouse gas emission and has one of the highest rates of per capita solid waste production. As the most disaster-prone region in the world, our communities are already contending with rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and food and water scarcities. The consequences of climate change and environmental degradation are severe and unevenly distributed, with those who are least responsible most often bearing the greatest burden. Pre-existing gender-based discrimination has limited the capacity of women and girls to adapt and recover from climate-related shocks and long-term environmental changes. In the context of disasters, women face higher rates of mortality, morbidity, and loss of livelihoods. The disproportionate impact of climate change is felt most acutely by women in rural areas. Like the ones at the center of managing resources for their families, rural women often depend on natural resources for food, shelter, water, and fuel. Ecosystem degradation is disrupting their capacity to sustain their families and communities, as many of these tasks now require longer hours and more physically demanding labor. Women in the region are already spending on average up to 11 hours a day on unpaid care and domestic work. Without redistributing these responsibilities, their workload will become insurmountable. Excellencies, according to the Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Report, our region is not on track or not on target to meet Goal 5 on gender equality and has fallen further behind on Goal 13 on climate action. Due to gender biases in norms and systems, women and girls still lack in many areas, including education, labor force participation, and political representation. To achieve equality, unpaid care and domestic work must be recognized, reduced, and redistributed. At ESCAP, we have created policy guidelines in partnership with relevant stakeholders, including ASEAN, to support member states in addressing these inequalities. Despite the discrimination women and girls face, they should not be viewed as victims without agency. Having managed the sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity for generations, women and girls hold essential knowledge and skills. Their potential, however, remains untapped or underutilized. Women are underrepresented in parliaments and as environment-related ministers and policymakers. I hope that the panel discussion later this morning will highlight the role that young people can play in addressing these challenges. Excellencies, governments in our region committed to promoting the active role of women as holders of knowledge and agents of change, and the full and equal leadership and participation of women in the Asia-Pacific Declaration on Advancing Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment at the Beijing +25 review. If we are to achieve a sustainable future, we must live up to these existing commitments and give women the voice and power to make decisions on climate change and disaster risk reduction. Achieving equality will require a holistic and collaborative response. We must continue to bring together gender, climate, environment, and disaster policymakers, experts, and practitioners with those who have lived experiences of the devastating effects of climate change and disasters and learn from one another. We stand ready to continue fostering policy discussions and supporting member states in mainstreaming gender across all sectors. On this International Women's Day, let us strive for equality toward building a more equitable, sustainable, and climate resilient world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Amida, for your compelling remarks. And thank you for your commitment to gender equality and sustainable development. As you highlighted, women must be empowered to make decisions on climate change and be agents in that respect. Women are disproportionately impacted by disasters in the Asia-Pacific region. And as we just heard from our Secretary General as well, the time is now. Dear participants, I am now pleased to welcome Ms. Sarah Nips, Officer in charge of the UN Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, to deliver her opening remarks. Ms. Nips, please, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, youth ambassadors, fellow feminists, colleagues and participants. Good morning and a very warm welcome to this extremely important commemoration of International Women's Day 2022. The Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow theme recognizes the inherent connections between combating climate change impacts, reducing disaster risks, and achieving the SDGs. The theme recognizes that women are more vulnerable to natural and conflict-related disasters and climate change impacts than men are, particularly as women constitute the majority of the world's poor and are more dependent on natural resources that are threatened the most. We need equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. At the same time, however, it's very important to remember that women and girls are not passive actors in the face of these challenges. They are effective and powerful leaders and change makers. Women and girls all around the world are leading the charge on climate change adaptation and mitigation. They are a driving force in disaster risk reduction and are unwavering allies in helping to build a more sustainable future for everyone. Looking around the room today, it's wonderful that we're joined by the young people taking part in the Ambassadors for a Day initiative. They truly are global agents of change. Around the world, women and girls are involved in sustainability initiatives, and their participation and leadership result in more effective climate action. A sustainable tomorrow indeed needs equality today. We know that the world and the Asia-Pacific region have largely recognized this as an imperative. However, we have to recognize that there is more to be done in the region to effect meaningful change. Among several of the factors that hamper progress is the lack of sex-disaggregated data and analysis on the extent to which climate change impacts, the COVID crisis and other disasters have specifically affected women and girls. This type of data is crucial to informing national policies, effectively implementing response measures, and measuring success, as well as learning from failure. Strategizing on how best to work with the data that we do have and how to improve data collection and analysis are central to today's discussions. Our primary focus must be to devise strategies to ensure that every aspect of climate action incorporates a gender lens into its design and its implementation. And in doing so, we will also hone strategies for advancing key international gender equality frameworks in national and regional agendas. So today we will have the opportunity to hear from distinguished ministers from around the region who will share insights and experiences from their countries. We will also hear from the young leaders of today, the youth voices on climate change, who contribute to, shape and carry on the work in climate space. I am truly very inspired by the youth who are here with us today. Their video entries for the Youth Ambassador competition have demonstrated innovation, energy, and enthusiasm for addressing climate change and disaster risk reduction. In the spirit of youth activism, UN Women is also very excited today to announce the continued elevation of young feminist leadership for gender equality through the launch of the 30 for 2030 initiative. This initiative is a youth leadership network that brings together young decision makers, eminent civic and business innovators, feminists, entrepreneurs, technology pioneers, educators, activists, artists, journalists, all determined change makers to accelerate progress toward the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The 30 for 2030 thought leaders will champion a feminist perspective, breaking down gender barriers and making gender equality a working reality in their own spheres of influence. This new network will also act as an advisory community and accelerator of vision, courage, and influence to drive positive change for a gender-equal world. The youth insights, the knowledge that we share, and the connections we make today will help to form the basis for fruitful long-term collaborations. I look forward very much to these rich and productive sessions and look forward to working with all of you to achieve gender equality to secure a sustainable tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nips, for your inspiring remarks. Highlighting the need to achieve equality today, if we are to achieve a sustainable tomorrow, and integrating a gender lens into climate action. Thank you. We will now view a short film produced by UN Women in honor of International Women's Day 2022, entitled "It's Not Too Late: Climate Action for Women by Women."
Earth, our only home. Invaluable, but not invulnerable. Are we too late to save it? Climate change is making our world more dangerous, more fragile, more unequal. In these uncertain times, women and girls face a disproportionate threat of displacement, poverty, and violence. But women and girls are also a powerful force in climate action. As innovators in green energy, as defenders of the environment, and as educators of our generation and the next. Gender equality is not just a woman's issue. It's the path to our survival. So it's not too late to invest in climate action by and for women. Not too late to empower women entrepreneurs and decision makers at home. Not too late to give voice and power to this next generation of Earth's champions. It's not too late to demand commitments to build an equal and enduring future for all. Championing climate action by and for women and girls is the key to saving our planet. Join the fight for gender equality today, so that together we can create a sustainable tomorrow. It's not too late.
Thank you, UN Women, for this moving film and for your collaboration and many contributions to this important commemoration. Dear participants, we will now hear special addresses from several ministers from the Asia-Pacific region. And it is my pleasure to invite Her Excellency Ing Kantapavi, Minister of Women's Affairs of the Kingdom of Cambodia, to deliver her special address. Honorable Ing Kantapavi, please. The floor is yours.
Honorable Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished representative of ESCAP and UN Women, honorable fellow ministers and UN member states, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greeting from the Kingdom of Cambodia. It is my pleasure to deliver a special address at this Asia-Pacific Regional Commemoration of International Women's Day 2022. A call for an absolute commitment to equality today for a sustainable tomorrow has never been more urgent for all, and especially for our region, Asia-Pacific. Certainly, Cambodia too still faces challenges on the path of addressing barriers to women empowerment and achieving gender equality, also within the context of climate change. This is why exchange and dialogue on how we can accelerate progress towards incorporating a gender lens in all action, and especially in climate action collectively, is of greatest importance. Today, I would like to share with you that the Royal Government of Cambodia is strongly committed to combating global climate change impact and has made great strides in mainstreaming gender equality in climate change response, especially in the most prioritized adaptation and mitigation sectors, and the measure to promote gender equality to enhance environmental sustainability and climate resilience are included in national policies, strategies, and plans. The government is fulfilling its responsibilities under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, into which gender concerns have now been well integrated. Also, addressing gender gaps and vulnerabilities is one of the key strategic objectives of the Cambodia Climate Change Strategic Plan 2014-2023, which has associated action plan developed by 14 line ministries. These plans are detailing the country adaptation priorities and providing the roadmap for the decarbonization of key economic sectors and the enhancement of carbon sink. I would like to stress that both the strategic plan on gender, climate change, green growth, and disaster risk management have been integrated within the CCCSP, as well as our master plan on gender and climate change 2018-2030. In Cambodia and elsewhere, the sustainability of the environment depends on the knowledge and participation of women, which need to be considered in policy making and implementation. With this in view, the Ministry of Women's Affairs formulated not only the master plan on gender and climate change 2018-2030, but also the gender and climate change strategic plan 2013-2023 to address gender aspect in the adaptation to and mitigation of climate change and environmental sustainability. Moreover, the ministry made its 5-year national strategic plan for gender equality and women empowerment fully climate change inclusive by making climate change response one of the core strategies and priorities. Secondly, Cambodia decided to also celebrate Cambodia International Women's Day under the title of Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. However, this title inspired the embracing of a broader theme focus which intends to shine a light on the substantial contribution, strengths, and incredible resilience of Cambodian women, not only in the face of climate change and in times of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also in the context of all of the country development challenges and strong commitment to all sustainable development goals. This includes a dedicated commitment to, first, further the path toward universal health coverage and to further improve the gender responsiveness of the program and scheme of our national social protection. Second, addressing gender gap and inequalities in digital access, literacy, skills, and leadership, as well as in the representation in both educational setting and the career landscape related to STEM and ICT. Third, mainstreaming gender equality, economic opportunity, and empowerment as a core component of good governance, green growth, and recovery agenda to drive the necessary transformational change toward inclusive and sustainable green growth. This is indispensable from boosting women entrepreneurship development and addressing the challenges they face in green growth and eco-innovation, as well as accelerating the development and improvement of Cambodia care economy. I would like to address my appreciation to UN ESCAP for the close collaboration in developing new paths towards women economic empowerment and addressing women unpaid care and domestic work. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it is an undeniable fact that our region is among the most vulnerable regions to climate change and impacts in the world. Thus, more than ever and more than others, we have to listen to this unprecedented wake-up call to join hands for moving away from business as usual and turn crisis and recovery into decisive act and real opportunities for a sustainable tomorrow and a prosperous and equal future that truly leaves no one behind. Not our planet, not our women and girls, and not our poor and vulnerable. This, however, is not achievable without realizing gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by today, not tomorrow. Thank you.
While we thank Her Excellency In Kantapavi for her remarks, it's now my pleasure to invite Excellency Smriti Subin Irani, Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development of the Republic of India, to deliver her special address. Honorable Smriti Subin Irani, the floor is yours, please.
Respected Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be amongst you today on the occasion of the Asia-Pacific Regional Commemoration of International Women's Day 2022, focused on equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. Today, what we witness is a unique challenge, one that no one is fully still prepared to fight. But the world has reached a point of no return. On one hand, there is a growing recognition of the disproportionate impact that climate change will have on women, while on the other hand, there is a rising awareness of the tremendous social, economic, and climate resilient benefits that gender equality and women's empowerment can bring to this sector. This evolution is reflected in the progress made in terms of mainstreaming gender into climate resilient promising practices. Allow me to quote the guiding principle of our Honorable Prime Minister, that Sanyam and Sankalp, namely restraint and determination, are the two key principles behind India's commitment to gender-responsive climate action for an equitable, inclusive, and sustainable tomorrow. In agriculture, for instance, climate change would enhance the existing barriers faced by Indian female farmers. Women comprise over 60% of the agricultural workforce and play a critical role in supporting household and community food security and nutritional needs. The Government of India is investing in climate resilient infrastructure, assets, and adoption of new farming practices, including women's increased access to long-term affordable finance and agricultural extension services. Cognizant of the fact that women are easily trapped in a downward spiral in the absence of concentrated efforts to close the gender gap in access to productive resources for climate resilient agriculture, the Government of India has taken steps in targeted outreach and special provisions for women engaged in agriculture. India ranks 4th in the world in installed renewable energy capacity. India's non-fossil fuel energy has increased by more than 25% in the past 7 years and now reached 40% of our energy mix. India has brought reforms that are helping the world navigate through climate emergency. The world recognized the use and adoption of solar power as the key element in global action on climate. India has taken the revolutionary step of announcing the International Solar Alliance and has created a coalition for disaster-resilient infrastructure for climate adaptation. This is a sensitive and vital initiative to save millions of lives. On ground, for example, the Government of India has revamped our Anganwadi centers, the world's largest community-based programs that holistically addresses the health, nutritional, and educational needs of our children and future mothers. Saksham Anganwadi, namely Smart Anganwadi as we call them now, are solar-powered community centers to improve service delivery of the center and host a range of basic services and activities for our underserved communities by installing solar-powered lighting, fans, mobile charging systems, amongst others. The Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana is yet another example where India is using clean energy fuel to support over 90 million Indian women and girls by reducing drudgery at the individual household level, enabling better health prospects for women and children, and increasing livelihood opportunities for Indian women. Through the Ujjwala Yojana, women in India have been able to access affordable, sustainable energy and reduce the time spent on domestic work and direct care. These ambitious and bold plans of gender-responsive climate action and climate-resilient practices need double financing efforts and continuous investment for a lasting and positive outcome. India has increased its budgetary allocation in the power sector by 30% in the year 2022 to support its commitments made by the Honorable Prime Minister in COP26. India has also recently announced the sovereign green bonds under the government's overall marketing borrowings in 2022-23. The bonds will be used to raise funds for environmental and climate-friendly infrastructure to empower and benefit women and men equally from the rapidly growing renewable energy industry. Let me close by saying this, that it is well noted that environment and climate resilient policies and plans need to recognize the pervasive gender gaps in access to resources, technical knowledge, economic opportunity, and financial services while taking women's needs into adequate account. Learning and knowledge exchange platforms such as this is one of the better ways to improve our joint efforts in making a safe, inclusive, and sustainable future a reality soon. Jai Hind.
While we thank Excellency Smriti Subin Irani for her remarks, it is now my pleasure to invite Excellency Chung Yong-ai, Minister of Gender Equality and Family of the Republic of Korea, to deliver her opening remarks. Honorable Chung Yong-ai, the floor is now yours.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to join the commemoration of International Women's Day 2022 on the theme of Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. First and foremost, I extend my gratitude to the officials of UN ESCAP and UN Women for arranging today's event. My heartfelt thanks also go to Honorable UN Secretary General Guterres, honorable ministers of the Asian Pacific countries, and all the speakers and guests joining today. Today's theme, Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, underscores the importance of the immediate efforts to tackle inequality facing us in order to usher in a better future. On March 8th, 100 years ago, women workers marched, demanding women's equal rights to survive and vote. Thanks to their call, we are enjoying a better today. Now is the time for us to raise our voices and take actions together to make a better future for our younger generations. One of the looming threats to the future generation is the climate crisis. Experts say that vulnerable groups will be hit harder by the climate crisis when combined with socio-economic factors such as gender, region, and class. In this light, it is critical for international society to thoroughly analyze the gendered impact of climate change and come up with ways to address gender inequality brought by the climate crisis. Thus far, the Korean government has worked hard to address one of the most important tasks of the time, carbon neutrality. It announced its vision to go carbon neutral by 2050. In addition, for gender-sensitive climate response, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family conducts gender impact analysis on related policies. The ministry has also made recommendations to relevant ministries for stronger policy response and capacity from gender perspectives, such as surveys and studies on the gendered nature of climate change. Going forward, the Korean government will work together with global community to reinforce gender-responsive climate actions. Most importantly, as the UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality is slated to open in the first half of this year, the center is expected to play a vital role in gender-responsive climate action in the Asia-Pacific region. Furthermore, the center will strengthen gender equality policy capabilities in Asia and the Pacific by conducting research, providing education and training, and building partnerships in key areas, including women's economic empowerment, humanitarian action, and disaster risk reduction. I count on your support and interest in the center so that it can create vital momentum to advance gender equality, including climate response in the region. Today, I look forward to in-depth discussions to find effective way to combat climate change and achieve a sustainable future. Korea will work with you in the joint effort to close gender inequality and build a more just future. Thank you.
While we thank Excellency Chung Yong-ai for her remarks, it is now my pleasure to invite Excellency Siflina Hassan, Minister of State for Gender, Family and Social Services of the Republic of the Maldives, to deliver her special address. Honorable Siflina Hassan, the floor is now yours, please.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor to address you all today on the occasion of International Women's Day on the theme Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, which is highly relevant in consideration of the rapidly accelerating climate crisis and its gendered impact. The Maldives is one of the most climate vulnerable nations. In recent years, the Maldives has seen an increase in the intensity and frequency of tropical storms and flooding incidents, along with erosion and degradation of coral reefs. The effect of disasters and climate change are felt on a deeper, disproportionate level by women in the Maldives. Almost half of the employed female population are engaged in the informal sector, and a large portion partake in the activities such as small-scale agriculture, fish and food processing, and craft such as rope and mat weaving. These women are dependent on natural resources for their income, and disasters such as floods and storms and environmental degradation pose a significant threat to their livelihoods. Women are also often the key family members engaged in caretaking. Due to the social norms regarding employment, most women stay behind in their local islands, while men have to migrate or spend large portions of time away from home. As a consequence, it is women who have the primary role of acting as first responders in local islands and who have to bear the brunt of the impact of climate disasters. Incorporating gender considerations into national adaptation and disaster risk reduction plans is thus of utmost importance. Gender mainstreaming across all institutions and sectors is an overarching national priority of the Maldives. In line with this, the Maldives has developed a 5-year national action plan on gender equality. Just a few weeks ago, the National Gender Equality Action Plan has been endorsed by the Maldives Cabinet. This plan will be implemented from 2022 to 2026, and it will be operationalized in the coming months under the guidance of a high-level steering committee led by His Excellency President Ibrahim Mohamed Soleh. This plan will establish a framework to facilitate interagency coordination to enable gender mainstreaming and will allow for greater integration of gender perspectives into environmental and climate-related work. The GEAP also aims to strengthen the overall monitoring framework of gender policies and strategies in the Maldives, including the availability of relevant sex disaggregated data. One of the key targets in the GEAP is increasing women's involvement in meaningful participation in public life. Enabling women to have meaningful say in all levels of developmental planning and policy formulation is critical to ensure that their situational knowledge is benefited from and women's specific needs are addressed. In the Maldives, I am proud to note that the dialogue on climate change and environment is led majorly by women, including government actors such as the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Technology, the Special Envoy for Climate Change at the President's Office, and many women-led civil society organizations. The Maldives remains steadfast in its belief that gender equality and environmental rights are cornerstones of sustainable development. The Maldives reaffirms our commitment to advancing these areas through our candidature for the Human Rights Council seat from 2023 to 2025. We hope to continue the good precedent set by successful policies through the operationalization of the Gender Equality Action Plan, which reflects the Maldivian government's commitment to gender equality, particularly as a means to a sustainable future. Thank you.
And while we thank Her Excellency Siflina Hassan for her remarks, it is now my pleasure to invite Excellency Masako Mori, Special Advisor on Women's Empowerment to the Prime Minister of Japan, to deliver her special address. Honorable Masako Mori, the floor is yours, please.
Distinguished participants, it is a great honor to participate in this event on the occasion of International Women's Day as a special advisor to the Japanese Prime Minister on Women's Empowerment. 気候変動は地球規模の安全保障と経済の繁栄に脅威をもたらす最も深刻な課題の一つです。気候変動に起因する災害も増加しているところ、未然に備え、発生を見越した対応策を検討することが肝要です。とりわけ、アジア太平洋地域は世界人口の約6割が集中する自然災害が頻発する地域です。気候変動が自然災害にもたらす影響と地域の社会経済的な脆弱性の関連性を分析し考察する必要があります。この関連で日本は気候変動の課題に対処するあらゆるレベルの意思決定のプロセスに女性の参画を確保することが必要と考えています。そのため2016年度よりユニタールを通じて太平洋の島諸国を対象とする津波防災に関する女性のリーダーシップ研修を実施し、海面上昇により被害の深刻化が懸念される津波に対する防災能力の強化に取り組んでいます。気候変動により自然災害の被害が増す中、2021年度からはESCAPを通じてアジア太平洋地域においてジェンダーにも配慮した防災対策立案支援も実施しています。グローバルな課題に対処するためには自国の利益優先ではなく 人間の安全保障の理念に基づき、他国と協調することが不可欠です。本日のイベントが各国の好事例や教訓を共有する場となり、国際社会が協働していく大きな一歩となることを期待しています。
And while we thank Excellency Masako Mori for her special address, we are now concluding our opening session, and I would like to thank again all our speakers for their thoughtful remarks. Madam Executive Secretary, Ms. Nips and Dr. Tata, you are welcome to take your seats in the audience. Dear participants, we will now have a session focused on a special feature of today's program, in which we will have the opportunity to listen to and learn from the voices of youth. We are particularly looking forward to you for innovative ideas on how we can advance our common agenda for a sustainable tomorrow. On the occasion of International Women's Day, women ambassadors and women leaders from the United Nations in Thailand launched the 2022 edition of the Ambassadors for a Day competition to encourage youth to express their views on how social issues are affecting women and girls in their community. Now, it's my pleasure to invite one of the organizers, Ambassador of Belgium, Excellency Sibylle de Cattier-Dive, to make the presentation on this initiative, along with her two ambassadors for a day, Ms. Punyapon Saisoy and Ms. Pakira Charoen Paitun. Ms. Eves, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Executive Secretary, Mrs. Amida Harishemana, for associating us today. And I want to underline the work of all the participating embassies and UN head agencies. This initiative was really a teamwork headed in particular by the UN resident coordinator, sorry, Gita Sabawal, and her team that I want to thank. So as last year, under the leadership of Canada and India, we have organized this year again the Ambassador for a Day initiative. Why did we want to do this initiative again? The first reason, of course, at the occasion of International Women's Day, is to give again the signal of the importance of gender equality. As many speakers underlined it, it's a question of our future. It's a question of balance. And it's not only a question for women. A few years ago, the UN launched this initiative, He for She, and this initiative remains valid. The question of equality and balance will only be achieved when it's not a question of women against men, but of a question of being together. As ambassadors, as heads of UN agencies, we wanted to give our voice, give our image to support the breaking the ceiling. We wanted to support the thematic of this year of breaking the unconscious bias. And we wanted also to support young people of Thailand or living in Thailand to be actors of changes in that regard. We live in a world of challenges. These young people have just experienced 2 years where schools have been interrupted, where they have had fear for their health or health of their relatives. We are entering a world where war is becoming again part of our life. And allow me to express here a word of solidarity for the people of Ukraine, which are going under this type of challenges for the moment. facing an attack from another country. So we wanted to give a positive, we wanted them, to give them the opportunity to transform these challenges into a positive vision. And allow me to give the floor to Kun now, who has been one of the participating youth, to explain a bit what brought her to participate and what she expects from the day.
Thank you, my ambassador. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Bunyapon Saisoi from the Ambassador for a Day competition. The reason I decided to participate in the Ambassador for a Day competition is that the idea of the international relation had always been fascinating to me. Moreover, the topic of this competition is about climate change and gender inequality issues that affect women and children. Nowadays, people around the world are beginning to take serious action about climate change and gender inequality, and of course, I am one of them. I believe being in this position will make me understand more about this issue, and it will definitely teach me the valuable process that required to be a good leader. The other reason is that I want to prove myself and send my voice to all of you that I do appreciate women around the world, the ambassador, mothers, actresses, teachers, students, and everyone. You are talented and hardworking. Lastly, with this opportunity, I would like to mention Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the USA. She said, "What I want young women and girls to know is that you are powerful and your voice matters." Thank you.
Thank you, Gunnar, for these strong words. And the thematic of this year and the thematic of the videos that the youth have sent us was about equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. So allow me to invite Kunten, that was the thematic that was underlined under your video, to give us her perspective on this thematic.
Thank you for the question, Your Excellency. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pakhazira Zarunpaitun. And I believe that climate change and gender inequality share one similarity, that they are both sadly have been ignored since they are not quite apparent compared to the other issues like poverty, war, or sanitation. Especially in Thailand, these two crucial issues are sometimes considered to be dispensable to discuss. However, they are seriously destructive and strongly relevant to each other. Climate change forces everyone to adapt in order to survive. Unfortunately, adaptation is much more difficult for women because of gender inequality. For instance, climate change diminishes economic and career opportunities for everyone. But for women's situations, it is even more aggravated by persistent problems like glass ceiling. This is just one example that shows why it is vital for all of us to acknowledge and provide solutions for gender inequality, altogether with solving climate change and other problems, so that we can finally drive into a sustainable, developed future for everyone in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kunten. And as a conclusion, first, you have seen that we are in good hands with the young leaders of tomorrow. And I want to congratulate and maybe ask you to congratulate with me all the participating young people that have sent us the video, and in particular, all the ones that have been selected for this initiative. And the Secretary General said it, the time is now. We have been celebrating for more than 100 years International Women's Day. we have seen that at the rhythm we go now, we have 130 years more to go. I am now making the wishes that in a very few years, we do not need to celebrate this day again. Thank you, and the floor is yours, Kunsha.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, Ms. Sai Soy, Ms. Charun Paitun, for your remarks. And thank you again to Ambassador Dikachadev for supporting this wonderful initiative. The competition received over 130 video submissions showing great diversity and creativity. To get an overview of all of the submissions and how youth address the relationship between women and sustainability, climate change, and the environment in videos, we will now view a montage of the submissions, with many thanks to the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand for their support.
My name is Asaya Kornenson.
My name is Saharat Laksana.
Hi, my name is Bunyapon Saisoi.
Greetings, my name is Sirisodhai Ratanaong.
สวัสดีครับ ผมนายภัคขมลผาทอง
สวัสดีค่ะ Hello.
Bonjour. Hello everyone.
สวัสดีค่ะ
In recent months, there have been a lot of news related to sexual harassment, which women are the victims.
Las mujeres con discapacidad sufren la discriminación interseccional, es decir, son tratadas de forma discriminatoria por ser mujer y por su discapacidad.
For my whole life, I have lived in Narathiwat, the most southern province in Thailand. In this place, I realized that the big problem for women and girls is education inequality.
Saviez-vous, les représentations sexuelles sont portées par les personnages masculins ou féminins utilisés dans les manuels scolaires. Par exemple, les hommes illustrent toujours des professions supérieures comme médecins, PDG et ingénieurs. Par contre, les femmes et les filles sont dépeintes avec un poste inférieur aux hommes.
The underrepresentation of women in other positions of power remains one of our biggest challenge and social issue.
Because an inclusive community the future generation deserves wouldn't stem from female objectification or gender pay gap among countless other issues women are facing today.
Climate change is a major crisis that affects people around the world. However, women are more vulnerable to the effects than men.
This is because as a result of their gender, they already experience inequality and discrimination, which combine and escalate when disasters occur.
โดยกลุ่มคนที่ได้รับผลกระทบมากที่สุดคือกลุ่มเปราะบางและกลุ่มคนยากจนซึ่งมีผู้หญิงคิดเป็นสัดส่วนมากถึง 70%
The very first step of reducing the problems is to talk about the problems.
Knowledge about gender equality and global warming is very crucial for us to live our life.
Education is always the most powerful weapon in the fight against all forms of violence.
It will increase opportunities for women to have access to the right knowledge.
Cover the right of a woman by raising awareness of discrimination.
We can empower these girls to know their rights, to be whoever they want, to do what they have not done. And finally, these girls can extend empowerment to other girls in the community as well.
I believe that we can make the world a better place for us and for girls like this little one.
I'd like to play a larger part in achieving equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this montage. It is indeed inspiring to see so many youth who are passionate about gender equality and sustainability. And in honors of today's theme on sustainability, we will now view one video submission by Ms. Tomoko Ikuda that is focused on climate change and the impact on women.
Despite many decades having gone by, climate change still holds its place as one of the greatest threats facing our planet, but its effects are being shaped by pervasive and entrenched gender inequality.
Heat waves, droughts, floods, and poor air quality disproportionately affect women.
Hi, my name is Tomoko, and I'm currently studying at the International School Bangkok in Nonthaburi.
As stated before, the climate crisis has been a prevalent issue for many years now. There's no doubt that climate change affects people of all groups. However, it is clear that it has a bigger impact on women and girls, especially those who are conceiving a child. They have more difficulty than men when it comes to staying hygienic and mentally healthy, and going to work, meaning that they would earn less income for their families.
This is concerning as it is impacting those who are least responsible for the carbon emissions.
I have seen the news that there has been a case of massive floods in various provinces in Thailand, such as a 2-month flood in Suphanburi, which has made it harder for pregnant women to evacuate the area.
As a young activist, I have begun to take action. Firstly, I created a social media platform called Fight Climate Change, which is a page on Instagram aiming to spread awareness and combat climate change.
I am also a part of UNICEF's Young People's Advisory Board, where young leaders and myself are involved in the decision-making process to address climate change and other environmental problems. Furthermore, I have joined many global youth networks to brainstorm solutions and was able to be a guest speaker at COP26.
I hope that action can be taken as soon as possible so that girls and women no longer have to suffer from the consequences of climate change. And with that, we can live in a better world all together. Thank you.
Dear participants, I am now pleased to invite two of the outstanding delegates amongst the selected ambassadors for a day to deliver their reflections on a path forward towards a sustainable tomorrow. These young women were also the delegates of Thailand for the Youth COP26 in Milan. Our first speaker, dear Ms. Aminta Pamponvivat, the floor is yours.
Ms. Armida Elijabana, Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Ms. Geeta Sarpawal, UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand. Ms. Sarah Nibs, Officer in Charge, UN Women Regional Office. Your Excellencies, my fellow youth delegates, and friends, it's an honor to be here. Sustainability cannot be achieved without good education, but the climate crisis has widened learning disparities. Undeniably, women and girls face the most challenges, but at the same time, we are also at the forefront of the climate responses throughout the world. As a student, I've always believed that quality education and accessibility are the keys. I've had the opportunity to be a volunteer teacher in many areas across Thailand and met underprivileged students who don't even have their basic human rights, and it breaks my heart every single time. But by giving these students the opportunities to understand the values of sustainability and climate resilience, it can make a difference. One image has been ingrained in my mind, and that is of a little girl I taught. She was looking at me like I could be her savior, and for the first time, I saw it in her eyes that she had hope for change, and that touched something deep inside me. By giving others opportunities, I've also been given the opportunity myself to be Thailand's representative at the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition event at pre-COP26, where global youth leaders came together and made a manifesto that fights for real action. This experience opened my eyes to the power of youth, and it empowered me to do even more. To all the youth listening right now, every one of us deserves to lead. Every one of us deserves to be seen, to be valued, and to learn. In fact, the pre-COP26 youth event has been confirmed to happen every year, so I encourage you to stand up and use your voice. If we empower all children and eliminate gender and other socio-economic disparities, our generation of youth and beyond can become key drivers of climate resilience and form a mutual understanding that climate change is everyone's responsibility. Honorable guests, I'm grateful to be standing here before you, and it's an honor to support all of the work that you have accomplished. But lastly, my message is to young girls that you, too, have the power to make the world a better place. Because empowerment is the power in you, in each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Papum Mirat, for your wonderful remarks. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Patia Yongsangonchai to the rostrum, please. The floor is yours.
Executive Secretary of ESCAP, the UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand, the Officer in Charge of UN Women in Asia Pacific. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I became aware of climate change only 2 years ago, eagerly seeking for things I can do to alleviate this crisis. However, along my journey, I realized that helping others and the planet is not enough for people to take a stand. In fact, it is undeniable that most people are driven by personal interests, such as money, power, or reputation. As a result, the more I get into climate work, the more I see this ugly truth. However, we just can't blame someone for prioritizing themselves over others. It's human instinct, after all. But the question here is, can we work together to advance gender equality and climate action together? And the answer is yes, definitely. Let's take SCG as an example. This company was already successful while using cement plants that harm the environment. However, as they decided to become eco-friendly afterwards, they also gained profit and as well be internationally recognized as a leader in sustainable business. Now, this shows us that climate action is not only about community service, but it's also about profit and reputation. But how? It's because we can all agree that we're united by global initiatives like the SDGs, for example. Thus, if climate action and gender equality is what society values, then it is of value for us to commit and act on it. To clarify, SCG does it by being true to themselves, not just by taking photos with young people or making advertisements a tad greener. The amount they contribute to the people and the planet is equal to the amount they gain in money and reputation. Fighting for equality can bring personal success through commitment and action. Together, we can advance climate action and gender equality because all of us can gain something of value by giving. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yongwan Yunchai, for these wonderful, inspiring remarks. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the interactive dialogue Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. May I please invite the panelists to come and take their seats on stage. This part of our program will discuss the importance of incorporating a gender lens in climate action, including increasing women's participation and representation within environmental decision-making. The session will be moderated remotely via Zoom by Ms. Geeta Sabharwal, United Nations Resident Coordinator in Thailand. As the Resident Coordinator, Ms. Sabharwal leads the United Nations in Thailand to deliver as one. And prior to assuming the position of Resident Coordinator in 2020, Ms. Sabharwal worked in development for almost 3 decades across Asia, focused on peace building, governance, and social policy. Ms. Gita Sabavo, please. It's my pleasure to invite you to moderate the session. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chani. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the interactive portion of the program on this year's International Women's Day theme of Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. I'm honored to be moderating as we learn from and are inspired by the speakers who are joining us today. My own career in development began working with women's microfinance in the Indian state of Gujarat, and I know firsthand what an extraordinary impact women and young people can make, even with the most modest of resources, and be at the forefront of climate response, as Khun Aminita just noted. Gender equality is a cross-cutting priority for the entire United Nations. This is explicitly set forth in the Sustainable Development Goal 5 as a foundation for the 2030 Agenda and all of the SDGs, which are built into Thailand's own development plans. In the theme of today's event, we know that women and girls are disproportionately at risk from the climate and ecological crisis we face. And just as importantly, that women-led interventions are uniquely effective at mitigating and adapting to those very risks. Today, we have the opportunity to move from theory to practice and hear from the panelists about their own experiences, challenges, and successes. These are women, and I'm delighted to note that we also have a teenager from whom we can learn a lot. They are change makers who have put in the hard work, determination, and innovative thinking to prevail, and in the process, shape society for the better. From founding startups and securing financing in a biased lending environment, to sparking social movements and inspiring girls and young women to assert their own power and agency, these experiences can be replicated and inform strategic thinking in social mobilization and to move the policy needle with government and the private sector. It is crucial that we clearly identify the systemic barriers and prejudices that women face, as well as celebrate living proof that those barriers can be overcome and nothing can stand in our way. During our discussion in preparation for today's panel, I was struck by the point that working towards gender equality and sustainability requires sustained campaign and sustained self-organization that I know one of our panelists is going to talk to in greater detail. The driving force for gender equality is here in attendance today, represented by the women's leadership, networks of support and expertise that will help build a more equitable and sustainable world for us all. It's a privilege to be part of these discussions. So without further ado, let's turn to our panelists. I'm pleased to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Bernadette Russell-Resson. Dr. Bernadette has more than 20 years of research and teaching experience on gender, environment, and international development in Southeast Asia. She's currently an associate professor at the Global Development Studies Department of Queen's University, Ontario, Canada. Our question to you, Dr. Bernadette, is, what are some of the positive changes and trends towards improving equality and sustainability that you have seen in the Asia-Pacific region? Dr. Bernadette, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and good morning, excellencies and distinguished participants, and good evening from Ontario, Canada. Thank you, ESCAP, for inviting me. I would like to share some thoughts about the theme of this event, which is on equity, sustainability. We're all trying to address the problem of climate change in many ways, and often climate change is understood as a technical or natural phenomenon, and thus actions to adapt to and mitigate to climate change are narrowly designed as technical solutions to address their impacts instead of their main drivers. This means putting social equity concerns aside and leaving social welfare ministries to address them. As a result, the effects may be a bit counterproductive and detrimental. Inadvertently, these technical solutions can lead to exclusion, dispossession, and intensifying economic, social, political, and gender inequality. For example, results show that some conservation and protected area schemes displace local people. Green economy investments can undermine local employment, and market-led forest carbon schemes can turn out to be green grabs that dispossess local forest users of livelihoods and resources. These exacerbate forms of inequality, including gender, as well as unsustainability. To counter these negative dynamics, there is potential for programs to holistically promote both sustainability and equity and aspire for transformative outcomes. I'd like to share just two examples. First, in India. In the drought-prone Marathwada region of India, 60,000 rural women as farmers and decision makers have better land tenure rights, leadership, engage in participatory governments. They take decisions and shift from cash crops to diversified mixed food crops and vegetables. They shifted from chemical inputs to bio inputs. They use local seeds, follow water and soil conservation methods, and diversify food sources to enhance nutrition and income security. What's the climate impact? These women have shifted from water-guzzling cash crops, such as soya, sugarcane, and cotton, to cultivating and consuming local food crops. Instead of monocultures, they grow 7 to 8 crops together with fruit trees. This has reduced input costs by 25%, making farming viable. Water and soil conservation practices have also led to improved biodiversity. What is the gender impact? At the heart of this approach is women's complete autonomy around what to grow, what to consume, and how much to sell. From the identity simply as farm workers, women have gained new economic and social status as entrepreneurs, grassroots advocates, and climate leaders. My second example, in the Philippines. Since 2007, the Manila Doctors Hospital has reduced its environmental footprint and capacitated isolated communities on disaster response and climate adaptation. The hospital has served over 6,000 beneficiaries with medical and surgical missions focusing on maternal care. They perform free reproductive health surgery, and they deliver disaster response support. This program is also funded by the income generated from recyclables. The communities are now self-reliant. What's the climate impact? The program involves investment in energy-saving equipment, solar energy, reducing plastic and hazardous waste, and acting strict procurement rules for environmentally friendly materials. This has saved a total of 10.33 tons of carbon emissions. The recyclables program also supports the hospital's efforts to preserve the last forest park in Manila, where the hospital operates. What's the gender impact? The project targets poor communities and focuses on maternal health care as well as sexual reproductive health care. 78% of their beneficiaries are women and youth. Their gender program, fostering as well on male involvement, has also created specific rewarding roles for women as well as community health leaders. These examples I mentioned are holistic, gender just, and transformational in nature. They mitigate and adapt to climate change in integrated ways. They're not just technical, but also address the unjust structures that keep people unequal in the first place. This is the aspiration and the ambition that we, as policymakers and development workers, should try to pursue. Apply holistic and empowering approaches, integrate the social and technical that collectively address climate change, social injustice, and inequality, including gender. Avoid siloing climate action as technical action, because bracketing out the social may lead to counterproductive outcomes and inequalities may persist. Thank you. I will end it there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bernadette, for sharing examples from India and the Philippines and the potential future trends in reducing water use, improving soil conservation, and the holistic gender and integrated policy solutions that are extremely critical for empowering gender equality and sustainability in the Asia-Pacific region. We'll come back for more details as we move on. Let me now invite our second panelist, Dr. Wandi Kunchon-Yakong. Dr. Wandi is the chairperson and CEO of SPCG Public Company Limited, one of the largest solar power companies in Southeast Asia. She built Thailand's first solar farm in 2010. And interestingly, Dr. Wandi is also the president of the National Council of Women of Thailand, offering her leadership to shape and transform women's lives in the country and across borders. Our question to you, Dr. Wandi, is what policies, in your opinion, could be put in place to help facilitate other women entrepreneurs like yourselves to start and grow their green businesses? Over to you, Dr. Wandi.
Thank you so much, Kun Gita, and welcome home. Good morning, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I just want to bring you back 12 years ago when I decided to walk out from my retirement. So at that time, I will not tell you how old am I at that time. So, but the government has announced the policy, Thai government has announced the policy to buy back solar energy from private sector. And the announcement has been placed in website for about a year. No one applied any of those license because no one believe in solar energy. So I myself personally so much believe in climate change. So I decided to walk out from my retirement because I think I want to change the forms of energy production from fossil fuel to be clean energy. So I applied the first license from the government, and they're so happy to see that people apply for the license. So they decide to give me 36 licenses together. So I start walking to the banks, to investors, to convince them to join the project. But it was so difficult to convince any of the investors as well as the banks. So then many of them telling me that I'm a bit too old to borrow the money, and the project is so new. No one know the history of the project, no track record in the field. So that's how I faced the challenge. So then I end up selling my house to use as the equity for the first projects. And I walked to many banks. So until the last bank, their color is green. So I said to the president, if you don't lend me the money, you have to go change the color of your bank. So the banks don't want to change the color. So they decide to listen to the project. And I got the first project financing. So after about 1 year of trying, walking every day to the banks, but when they lend me the money, now they walk to me. So they want to be sure the projects at the end success. So I, and from the first project of the 6 megawatts, nowadays 12 years later, so the government leading another 10,000 megawatt of the solar energy in this country. So the first phase of 36 solar farm, total of 260 megawatts, help 200,000 of CO2 reduction. So that's creating about 20,000 jobs creation during the construction. So the most difficulty that I can see as the entrepreneur to start up any business, so we don't have money to invest, we don't have equity to invest, we don't have a business track record. So the very important is, I think this is what the government or the UN, women or other agencies should consider setting up entrepreneur business advisor. So this can help X-ray or review the project as the technical, as the cash flow projection, as the legal matters for the project in order to start the project and to convince and to create the confidence to those investors and the bankers. So this is the important point of being the entrepreneur. If we don't have money, if we don't have experience, if we enter into the project, and what happens if we fail? So then banks only want to see a track record. Bank only want to see a good interest earning and to make sure that they will get pay back in time. So this is something that I feel is important, that to get the third party to endorse, to help convince the investor and institution of like bankers or financial institution. So this is my first part of the events that I want to share with the audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wandi, for your deep belief in support of clean energy and sharing your insights on the role that the private sector, investors and bankers have to play in gender equality and sustainable development, and the imperative to promote financial inclusion for budding women entrepreneurs. We'll come back to more later. Let me now welcome Lily Rallen Satithanasan, who many of you may know from her campaign against pollution caused by single-use plastics in Thailand. She's our youngest International Women's Day panelist today and has worked with government officials, private sector managers, and civic leaders to draw attention to the alarming levels of plastic waste. Our question to you, Lily, is, as a young leader, can you please speak to your experience in advocacy to reduce the use of single-use plastics? The floor is yours, Lily.
Hello, everybody. Esteemed guest, good morning. My name is Lily Lathin Satithanasan, and I'm a 14-year-old environmental activist from Thailand. I've met with multiple government ministries, large retailing companies, and more men in power than I can count over the last 5 years of my activism. But first and foremost, I am a young woman who has been raised in a country to fit a certain mold and standard, who has had spoken out over the issue of climate change and plastic pollution, despite being told that it's not my place to speak up. I had started my activism by the time I was 8. And by the time I was 8, I also realized the effects of climate change and plastic pollution. I remember going to the beach one day with my mother and seeing sand completely covered in plastic trash. I knew this was wrong. My world wasn't supposed to look like this, and something had to change. But if you want to make change first, you have to make sure that you're ready to change yourself. So I started small. I worked on myself and my families, and I started locally in my communities. And at that time, I didn't plan on becoming an activist or even trying to ignite mass change. All I wanted to do was to do the right thing. And as time went on, I became more and more frustrated with the lack of difference and change I made. But I also realized that being frustrated and staying sad wasn't going to fix the problem at hand. Then I decided to branch out. If I really wanted to make a difference, I would have to talk to the people who had the power to change. I called local government and told them the harm of single-use plastic and my intention to stop it. This went on for months because they kept on transferring me to different departments and different people. Even if I wrote letters to them expressing my concern, I would only get a reply back telling me that I should focus on my studies, playing with my friends, and that I should just let the adults do the work. But this was my future, and this was my home, so I had to speak up. So I did what any normal 8-year-old would do at that time. I started writing letters and emailing large corporations that retailed single-use plastic, hoping that they'd listen to me instead. I urged them to stop, because I knew at this point my future and the future of the youth was at stake. It took me months of phone calls and emails before I could actually meet with them in person. And all of them thought I was doing a homework assignment or any school activities, and they didn't take me seriously at all. But after many years and many meetings and presentations with both the Ministry of Natural Resources and large retailing companies, we worked to push towards and finding a solution, an actual solution. And finally, at the beginning of 2020, there was a nationwide ban of single-use plastic bags in 70+ major retailers in Thailand. This is one of my successes. I learned that environmental issues will affect everyone. Therefore, everybody has an equal responsibility to contribute to change, to work together and not against each other. We need to create solutions, not more problems and not more excuses. We are all connected by this earth together. We all live on this earth, and this will affect us all. Climate change is a human rights issue that is affecting minorities from disadvantaged regions all over the world. Nearly more than 500,000 people are migrating to different parts of the world to escape the climate crisis. And these women, mothers and daughters who are forced to carry their families on their backs, will experience disproportionate hardship. Climate change is not only a human rights issue, but it is also a feminist issue. From an ivory tower, these issues might seem much more further away than they actually are, but gender equality, inequality, spreads from marginalized communities to government houses. The opportunity given to me today and many more youth speaking here is a great example of what we can do to push for change. We need to pave the way for women's voices to be heard. The women and communities I had worked with paved the way for me. They inspired and empowered me to push for change. They saved me from the isolation that comes with activism and creating change. So we must encourage other young women and youth to push through the boundaries that are meant to seal them in. We can start by doing this by implementing social education in schools, teaching children to become future world citizens and future world leaders. When pushing for change, I was seen as a small young girl. They saw me as delicate. They forgot I had a voice, and for so long, I had to prove that I had a voice worth listening to. It took me years before I earned my voice as a young woman fighting for climate justice and plastic pollution, and it is time for climate change to be taken seriously so many more can find their voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily, for sharing your inspiration and success, despite being told not to speak up, to contributing to reducing plastic pollution, and for being a role model for many young women and men as they embark on the journey to make a difference in their respective communities, nationally and globally, in support of climate action. Let's now invite our fourth panelist, Ms. Cindy Bishop. Cindy is the Regional UN Women Goodwill Ambassador for the Asia and the Pacific. She's a model, actress, TV host, and activist against gender-based violence. Cindy started the Don't Tell Me How to Dress #campaign in 2018 and works as the knowledge director for Dragonfly 360, a regional gender equality advocacy platform. Our question to you, Cindy, is, based on your experience in media, can you speak to the role of media in inspiring and motivating large-scale climate action? Over to you, Cindy.
Thank you for the introduction, Geeta. Greetings, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Happy International Women's Day to all. We live in a remarkable time. We live in a world where access to information, to be able to witness life events around the world 24/7 is literally at the tip of our fingertips. There's no denying that media has become a platform that is easy to access, simple to understand, and incredibly impactful. I have worked in entertainment and media industry for over 25 years now, and just in that time, I've seen the incredible change media has made in really impacting our daily lives, our actions, our perceptions. Based on my own experience, just a few years ago, as Geeta mentioned, I posted a video to my social media channels in protest to the culture of victim blaming when it comes to sexual assault cases. And within just a few hours, I had thousands of women chiming in to share their own experiences and also their sentiments about sexual harassment, which was the catalyst for my Don't Tell Me How to Dress campaign against gender-based violence, which then went on to spearhead so many other initiatives, both from myself and many, many other stakeholders, including so many that are youth as well. So social media was the platform for my campaign. It brought all of us women and men together for a cause. And so you can see the very influential role that media has in shaping public opinion and has doubtedly influenced perspective on many issues. And so how do we harness this influence? How do we harness this power to start to shape perceptions on the very urgent crisis we are all shaping, which is climate change? We know that gender and climate are deeply intertwined, and we know that media has portrayed that the impacts of climate crisis affect women and girls disproportionately, and this is absolutely true. Media is a tool set up to broadcast to the world the realities of the situation. It has revealed women both as victims of climate change as well as active change agents who can contribute to mitigating the negative effects of climate change. We only need to hear the incredible story of Lily, who I still can't believe is only 14, how she used her voice, how she didn't give up, and how she is now an incredible role model and showing the world practical steps that we can take to end the use of plastic. So media is a tool that can help amplify her message and encourage others and inspire others to do the same. Media also plays a part in showing how women, even at the grassroots level, can contribute to climate change by exposing the impact that it's having on their daily lives. For example, when we see the impact that climate change has on women in local communities, it gives the opportunity for everyone and anyone to connect with those women, to learn from them, and to really find out what is happening. When you find out how many homes were displaced, when you find out how many women and girls have been subject to violence, how many of them have lost access to food and water, or more sadly, to family and friends, it basically humanizes the climate change impact. And so we then can use this as a tool to influence larger scale action. Ultimately, all of this media can help to initiate conversation. And when we spend more time discussing climate change and the women that are impacted by it, there's more time discussing solutions. Although the media has done well to cover climate-related news, it can also do more to acknowledge the women in climate change need a bigger seat at the table. Media needs to put women front and center at the climate crisis. This is key. By championing women champions and key change agents, media can help to shed more light on their efforts to mitigate the negative effects of climate change. The private sector also can carry on the spotlight to support women in climate change. Businesses at the grassroots levels are valuable sources of information. They can share firsthand knowledge of how climate change affects their communities, and more specifically, how it affects the women. Media can then play a key role in reviewing public views, which can equip the private sector to create and innovate gender-inclusive designs and adaptations to accelerate action towards climate change. And very importantly, the media can also hold accountable and scrutinize the public sector to make sure that we are all aligned in achieving environmental sustainability. At times, however, I feel that perhaps the media coverage of climate change can be too abstract. There's an excessive focus on what's going to happen in the future rather than the urgent issues and practical steps that we can be taking today. Climate change can also challenge our cognitive abilities just because of the magnitude of the situation. And sometimes this can lead to a sense of helplessness, of apathy, or a sense that I'm too small to do anything. And that is a very dangerous mindset to have. So there's an opportunity here as someone who is a member of the media and also someone who takes up a lot of space in the social media realm, to somehow simplify and provide accurate information that will inspire climate change in every moment of our day. Things like taking advantage of new technologies, new media platforms, although it can seem that we are being bombarded with these at accelerated speed, using elements such as powerful storytelling, using humor, using creativity and art. These are all wonderful ways to put these issues into bite-sized pieces that will resonate better with the public and inspire change. And so I am hopeful that media can continue to be used as a powerful tool to inspire large-scale climate action on behalf of the public. But we need to remember that all talk and no action is not going to get us anywhere. We need to remind ourselves that this is a fight for all peoples and all sectors, and media is simply a platform that will help us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, for sharing your thoughts on how the media is a tool to further inspire climate change action at the personal and the private sector level, to support learning, put women in the spotlight as they innovate through storytelling, humor, and inspire change. Unfortunately, the MC tells me that we've run out of time, and I will need to conclude our panel discussion. However, as we conclude, let me return to each of our panelists for a 30-second soundbite to share their final thoughts with all of you. Lily, we will start with you. What is the final message that you would like to share with other young people who are listening in today? The floor is yours.
My message to the youth is to, of course, not give up. We may be small, but we are not powerless in the face of climate change and plastic pollution and any more social issues that are currently affecting our future. We have the power to make a difference. Although we might be only 25% of the population, we are 100% of the future. I would like to give motivation and inspiration to those who need it in this time of need. And I would like to say good luck to my fellow peers and the youth. Thank you.
I will now ask Dr. Wandi to share her final thoughts. Dr. Wandi, the floor is yours.
Yes, I would like to invite all women around the world to help, to join hands and to join hearts to convince people to believe in women and also to invest in women, and you will not be disappointing. And also to join hands to stop climate change and also to make a better world for Lily and our next generation.
Thank you, Dr. Wandi. Let me now request Cindy to share her final comments. Cindy, the floor is yours.
I will continue along the lines of the media and how it has an effect on us, and that in spite of all the incredible changes that it can inspire, there is still a lot of misinformation and fake news out there, and how we need to remain vigilant that we are acting and quoting from verified sources backed by credible data, and that how do we take all the information that we know, moving it forward to inspire action. And just to echo the words of UN Women's Officer in Charge, Sarah Nebbs, earlier this morning, to use energy and enthusiasm to communicate to the world that we need equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. Thank you.
Now to our final speaker, Dr. Bernadette. Please share your final thoughts. The floor is yours.
Thank you. At a broader scale, I believe we need more humility and openness to learn in the face of climate change. We can start by learning from the climate justice groups and their vision and approaches on how to mitigate climate change. Their approaches are not just a matter of lifestyle or technical change, although that helps. For them, it is a matter of ensuring that we stop extracting from nature our sources of life. It is time. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists. It is evident that we will all need to work together to achieve gender equality and a sustainable future. Your work is inspiring and gives me great hope that we can achieve our goal of equality today for a sustainable future as we learn not to give up. I will now hand the floor back to our MC to close our commemoration. Over to you, Chani.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pavel, for your excellent moderation of this most interesting dialogue. And thank you very much to our panelists, both on-site and virtually, for joining us on this very important occasion. Dear participants, this marks the conclusion of our commemorative event this morning under the theme of International Women's Day 2022, Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And may I also take this opportunity to thank our more than 100 online participants who joined us virtually via Zoom or Facebook Live. We greatly appreciate your participation as well. And at this time, we will end the virtual part of the event. Thank you very much once again to online participants joining. For all of our on-site participants, we will now take a group photo. May you most kindly follow my instructions so we can set up the photo while maintaining physical distancing. And a kind reminder as well to please keep your masks on for the group photo. May I firstly invite Madam Executive Secretary, Ms. Sarah Nips and Dr. Tata to the stage. May I also now invite our panel